Tonight, the city of Lagos waits at the dock as all routes
Be the first to know. From the north, south, east, west, and around Africa, we break the news.
One Nigeria.
Now you can catch all the actions live as the news breaks. We are Core TV News.
Welcome to Core
A
TV.
24-hour news station.
Suspend the strike action in the interest of urgent national emergencies while negotiations continue. Consequently, all medical and dental doctors are hereby directed to resume duty at their working posts with effect from 08:00 hours of Monday, 25th August 2014. 2 months of salary arrears or relativity have been paid, and this is a beginning of redress of injustice which we have been encountering for the past 22 years. As we know before, the arrears will be calculated for 22 years, but we just said calculate for 6 months, which shows how magnanimous and patriotic doctors are. We have also been able to extract from the government there is need to review the hazard allowance. In the phases of Ebola, hazard allowance was still 5,000 naira per month for a doctor. Government has realized that this was indeed injustice. So we have achieved something, and these are the reasons why we now felt with the outbreak of Ebola and all the cries of the people, I think we should just subject all the others. You know, we had a 24-point demand. All others we are continuing on negotiation table while we face the attack of Ebola and other incidental diseases that are ravaging the country.
NMA President Lawrence Obembe there given the verdict 55 days after medical doctors down tools in Nigeria. And now they're saying, well, let's get back to work. It's Monday morning and it looks like everywhere is green for medical doctors as we speak. You heard him talk about 24 points. Not much of them have been settled. Negotiation is still ongoing. But because of this and that, most importantly, because of the Ebola virus in Nigeria, brought in by the American librarian, let's get back to work. I'm joined now by a seasoned public affairs analyst, Victor Hai. Good morning.
Good morning.
And thank you for joining us again.
Thank you for having me.
I mean, history has shown us that strikes haven't really resolved our issues. You heard him talk about the agendas that they had, and then, you know, the fact that the negotiation is still ongoing. When exactly will labor unions learn in Nigeria that strike doesn't solve the issues?
I mean, it's a shame that the doctors have lost a very potent, if you like, a very potent and okay, let me change the language now. They have lost the revered status that they have in the Nigerian society, and indeed the way they revered globally, because doctors ordinarily, by their very makeup, are people who are calm, cool, collected, very much in control. They don't react anyhow. They're calculated, and society respects them a lot as well, and there's a great burden of responsibility on their shoulders. That they decided to go on strike, well, okay, it's their right, they have a right to do that. But when I, along with a few other people, listened to their demands, it was, it just made nonsense of everything they were doing, fighting for titles like who should be a consultant, who should not be a consultant. I mean, these are things you can discuss. The Minister of Health is a medical doctor, okay? He's in government. And I believe that as a colleague who's still coming back into the profession and a consultant himself, he's someone you can speak to and get to talk to the president and the presidency and then see what you can do. Most times when labor unions go on strike, very little is achieved, because if you look at it in the end, you know, it's either in some cases lives are lost, in some cases people just suffer unnecessarily. So many things go wrong. And I think it's time we learned that, and as has happened in this case as well, that there's nothing as effective as dialogue, as negotiation. They've gone on strike. They expected the public to sympathize with them. They lost it. The public was not in sympathy with them because their demands very little had anything to do with the interests of the general public. Well, most of it was selfish. Okay? Secondly, they insisted, and then the Ebola scourge came, and then they sat at home through it. It was a moment for them to have even said, call it off. When the president the president resigned when he realized that the strike was becoming, you know, senseless. Maybe a bit political, if you excuse my putting it that way.
We'll get to that Ebola issue,
yes.
Victor, but would it be right for us to belittle these demands as they were? Earlier, I think last week, I had the vice chairman of NMA Lagos on the set, and he was talking about the hazard allowance. And he told me about a colleague of his who got punctured by a needle while trying to treat an HIV patient. And all she gets for that is 5,000 naira per month.
I sympathize with them on that ground, but you know what? When you bring 50% of water, 50% of let's say colored water, let's put it that way, or whatever sort. If you mix them together, you would have diluted it so much, you can hardly tell what the original color of the other colored water or substance was. What they did was they took those things that are critical and mixed it with, in fact, more than 80% of things that were totally irrelevant. And what do you get? In a situation like that, you will not know when you throw away the baby with the bathwater. And that's a terrible mistake they made. If they came with that alone, I can assure you, even I would lead people to the streets.
Let's look at medical doctors relative to other professions. ASU was on strike for 6 months. The other one, the Polytechnic version, was on strike for close to 9 months. But crying out loud, it looks like everybody's going on strike. We heard about soldiers. We're going to talk about that at the other arm of the show, who, you know, would not get posted to northeastern Nigeria. Is it a challenge, really, of doctors in Nigeria, or a challenge of the system, so to speak?
Strike is becoming, how do I put it, let's just say, strike is in vogue. It's never been known to really solve anything, quite frankly. I mean, it brings your problems to public notice, but I mean, there are so many other ways of resolving these things. You can lobby, you can use the media directly or indirectly to fight your case. You can lobby legislators, and there's so many things you can do. The minute you down tools, then you lose half the public that you expect to be on your side. I mean, you can't sit at home and refuse to teach my kids in school and expect me to sympathize with your cause. But if you are there and you're talking about it, or you make sufficient noise about it, or you give what they call the warning strike, you know, just a little, just shake the system a bit, just to demonstrate and say, look, we have the potential to do this, but we don't want to do this. We don't think it's the best, but we think we should be listened to, okay? I think that's much more effective. If we talk about the system, I mean, the system, it affects everybody. They're not the only ones. In fact, some of the people going on strike are better off than the rest of society. And the doctors are better paid than the rest of society. The ASU people are better paid than the rest of society. Of course, the doctors will argue they're in university for 6 or 7 years. How can they earn the rest? Nobody's arguing with that. You understand what I'm saying? But they should go and tell that to the businessmen who are making millions elsewhere, or the musicians who didn't spend that much and are making so much money. I mean, that's not the issue. The issue here is the integrity of the profession. Okay, if you're complaining that you spent so many years in school and that's why you should earn so much, and therefore every other person is infratic, you know, below you and all that, then it's not making sense.
You know, the viable alternative that comes to mind when we discuss strike is negotiation.
Of course.
But amazingly, these people also tell you the length of time they've engaged negotiating with the federal government, because that's how it starts. It starts with negotiation, and then by the time they realize that there's not much seriousness coming from the other party, then they're down tools.
I want to, let me put it this way. I think maybe some of the, I believe that many of them they have public relations officers, even the executives, but perhaps they're not trained. But I also know that many of them also have a relationship with PR practitioners. In situations like this, the media, for instance, let's talk about using the media, you know, the media can set agenda. If they bring things to the fore and it refuses to die off, very soon, something will be done about it, okay? If, for instance, I mean, look at what happened in the case of the police college. It just took one documentary, and that place is looking brand new right now, okay? I mean, the policemen could have gone on strike. They could have said the police college or the students there could have gone on strike and all that. It probably wouldn't have been as effective as that single documentary that brought out an outcry, okay? If the health system in the country is terrible, you can do a documentary and sponsor it. You can get the media to write about it and show graphical images of the state, and don't let it go out of the media. For as long as it's there, it keeps coming on, and people are talking about it. Of course, it would embarrass the people who are concerned. Look at the issue of the students in Russia, our students in Russia who were on scholarship, who have not received their pay and all that. It wasn't about a strike. It's just that the thing was brought to public knowledge. And last I heard, over the weekend, they've been paid. But that's because it was brought to public knowledge, and it embarrassed the government. You know, they could have gone on strike there. They could have gone to the Nigerian embassy, destroyed things and all that. What would it have benefited them? But somehow they managed to get it into the media. And into the media, from the media, it enters the public psyche. It becomes, you know, it gets into public space. It gets discussed. An agenda is set. People discuss it, talk about it, and then the persons concerned are forced to do something about it. So maybe they're not getting their strategy right.
There's a conspiracy dimension to all of this. Some will tell you that labor unions go on strike just a few months to a big election. Do you think that's just a way of coloring down the
I said something earlier
sincerity of the issues?
Well, I said something earlier on. I don't know if it was lost on you or on the public when I said these things are political. I said it. I mentioned it much earlier. I just didn't want to drag it in order not to take the issue. But you know, of course, that our labor unions are politicians, the union members. I mean, it happened, I don't want to name a state, but recently in one of the states, you know, they took sides and all that. And, you know, so sometimes they bring strikes to discredit governments and to make it seem like people are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And where a government detects that, then they adamant that it's okay, fine, you can go steal your own Jews, I don't care. You know what I mean? So these things happen, they can't be ruled out.
But can the federal government be exonerated in this particular issue of medical doctors in Nigeria?
Which of the issues? I mean, I told you something. It's not that the doctors don't have points. No. The doctors have valid arguments, not a problem. But they diluted it with so many things that are totally irrelevant. Things I would consider even childish, with due respect to the more responsible doctors who know that there are more important things than some of the things that some of them are fighting over, including the enemy chairman who resigned as a result of this thing, who realized that not all the points are relevant at all. You know, if you're talking about hazard alert, of course, like I said, I would go out into the street and fight for you. If you're talking about better conditions in the hospitals, you know, and you can explain how and why, we will back you up, because those same hospitals will go and use. Okay? But those things that bother on your ego, for God's sake, superiority in, you know, because you spent 7 years, the pharmacist probably spent 5 years, you're superior to him. The nurses who, I mean, if you can do the job, why don't you do everything? You understand what I'm saying? Those things are not relevant. They're not. If you think you deserve respect, you have to earn it. You understand what I'm saying? If the doctors have earned the respect of their co-professionals, those ones will give it to them. I don't see a pharmacist competing with the doctor for his job. Neither is the nurse competing for the role of the job. I mean, they're not doing that.
You know, the doctors were actually out of work for 55 days, even in the midst of
the Ebola.
What do you say? I don't know if you were close to the hospital. What do you say that Nigeria
I was there within the week.
Did Nigeria really miss the doctors?
Quite frankly, let me give you
because the international community is also
frankly,
praising Nigeria for doing well with the Ebola virus.
Yes. Honestly, we did. It's a shame, you know, that they're coming back now like dogs with their tails, you know, between their legs. Because honestly, we didn't miss it. And I want to give credit to Lagos State Government, the Commissioner of Health in particular, who led the team. He did a brilliant job. You know, the containment. And then the hospital in, the First Consultants, excuse my naming them, they did a brilliant job. And that's, I mean, you know, so they did it, and the doctors, you know, they have just, if they had, in the heat of the Ebola, when it started, if they had called off the strike, they would be heroes today. You know, they would be heroes today. Now, they can go on strike for the next 10 years. I was in a teaching hospital within the week, last week. All the wards were empty. And honestly, the nurses were there, of course, and all that. But as far as I'm concerned, they can go home for the next 10 years. We don't care. The reason they are coming back now is that I think somebody somewhere has pointed out, you know, that if you want to hit doctors, you hit them at the jugular, you know. And where's the jugular? The resident doctors that were sacked. And I think that is what has brought them to their knees, and that is what has forced them to negotiate and to want to go back to work. Nothing else.
Now, how would you describe the legitimacy, or rather some will put it the sanity of that decision to have sacked 16,000 resident doctors?
I won't call it sanity, I call it wisdom. It's not to do with sanity or legitimacy, it's just wisdom. Just, if someone is coming after you, you look for his weakest point, you hit him and he goes on his knees. I'm not siding with the government, mind you. Mind you, the doctors have points. I want that clear. They have legitimate arguments, even though they watered it down with things that are totally irrelevant. However, you know, like the Minister of Health said, it's a suspension. What they simply did was, okay, this is where, if you hit them at this point, they will go on their knees, and they will be more reasonable. That's to tell you how selfish they are. Okay, these demands are selfish, self-centered, nothing else. Okay?
But one would wonder what the rationale also was to have suspended the residency training programs.
But we're not missing them. They would not have been in hospital anyway. They would not have worked anyway. Do you understand what I'm saying? So while the strike was on, it was just as well to say, okay, look, just sit at home, don't worry, and let's even make it more official.
Is this not a way?
But of course they're coming back.
Is this not a way by the federal government to incapacitate the role and the efficacy of strike actions as a tool by labor unions?
No, well,
because the way it is now, if I go on strike now, all that has to happen is that they will just sack me and then I run back begging.
The federal government would never have discovered this. I would never have known that is their weak point. You understand what I'm saying? And that's why, you see, when you have a cane or a weapon, it's more potent. The threat of it is more potent than the use of it. If I've never been flogged, the fear of a cane, you know, would be stronger than when you flog me. When you flog me, you demystify it. You understand what I'm saying? The fear of a cane will be demystified. What you don't know, you are afraid of, but what you already know, you're not scared of. You know, we would never have known all of this. That's why when you do things, you must do them in measured points. Don't go all the way out and be unreasonable. Because when you do that, you force the other party to also find a way around it, which is what the federal government has just done.
Are you saying the enemy was unreasonable in that decision?
To do what, man?
To have gone on strike.
Please don't get me wrong. Some of their points are reasonable. Most of the points are unreasonable. If they had concentrated on the reasonable points, I back them up 100%. But mixing, remember the image I gave you, mixing more than 80% of reasonable things with 20% of reasonable things is diluting, is like majoring on the minor. So the issues they were complaining about were the real things they should have been talking about. They just put them all together. You understand what I'm saying? If they had concentrated on those things that affect you and I, then you and I can now fight for those things that affect them.
It's all right. I want us to take a break now so we can come ahead to do the other half of the show talking about security. But just before we leave that, how would you describe the position of the federal government in all of this? Because strike actions are not just limited, in this case, to medical doctors. Everyone seems to be in a hurry to go on strike because the certain issues have been left unresolved for a long time coming.
Well, I think it's embarrassing for any government. Strike is embarrassing for any government or any organization for that matter. No organization wants a strike or wishes a strike. The threat of a strike, I think, is even more potent than the actual strike in some cases, not in all cases. Okay. The idea behind if doctors threaten to go on strike and they go around and talk about it and bring out the issues, the public will fight for them.
How? By going out to protest, or they themselves going on strike?
Well,
on
it
their
depends.
behalf?
It depends. It depends. Okay, they've been at home now for 55 days. I don't miss them. I have an alternative. If they're not comfortable working in government, let them go and work in the
You agree that
private
not
sector.
many Nigerians like you have access to that alternative that you talked about?
Which is?
Private hospitals.
I agree with you, but how many people have confidence in even the hospitals where these people, or the government hospitals where these people go to? Which may be some of the basis for the strike. You understand what I'm saying? A lot of people will go to their traditional healers. They have more confidence in their traditional healers. They have more confidence in their faith healers, others in the private hospitals. You go to the attitude even in the government hospitals by these same professionals is appalling. It's not the government that is manning these state hospitals. It's these same professionals. You go there, the attitude is appalling. Of course, there are some good ones, and I've met a few good ones. Okay? But, I haven't missed them. You haven't missed them either.
We have had a more worsening situation where politicians and political leaders are alleged to travel out of the country to take care of their medical challenges. How do we correct this? Some have said that make politicians' children go to public schools and you see a great reform at that level. Maybe we should also make presidents, governors, and all of them ensure that they use our public clinics. Then we'll see better transformation.
You can only enforce that in a military regime. You can't do that.
Now, we have the National Assembly. Can't they make that happen?
They also have children that they don't want to go through the system. Yeah, I understand the rationale behind that. Okay. It's still a problem of leadership, and at various, how do I put it now? Medical healthcare is in the concurrent list, both state governments and the federal government and all that. So they all have responsibility and all that. But I think we need to have more responsible leadership. A leadership that realizes that it is only as good as the people it leads. Okay. The minute we have a leadership that thinks in that way, then obviously they'll get their priorities right.
Victor Okai will still be here on the other half of the show. We'll be turning our attention to the seemingly tug of war between the terrorist sect Boko Haram and the federal government over the sovereignty of Goza in Borno State. Now, there's a lot of stories surrounding that. Some were of the opinion that as at the time that elections in Osun was going on, where we had over 70,000 security operatives, there was a situation in Goza where there was no, of course, allegations here now, that there was no single security operative in that area. And we saw people from that area go into the state government house to protest the death, so to speak, of security operatives in that part. The latest report on that is that Boko Haram has declared an Islamic caliphate in that region. We'll be back shortly to discuss more on that. Don't go away.
You can now watch Core TV News live from anywhere in the world on our website, www.coretvnews.com. Click on Live TV on our website and watch us live.
And welcome to Core TV Primetime Days.
To follow us on Twitter, click on Twitter icon on our website. On Facebook, click on the Facebook and YouTube to see all our previous news production. You can also watch us live on YouTube. Click Core TV, leave a space, then News. Core TV News, a 24-hour news station.
Glad to have you join us on another edition of The Political Arena, the most detailed and incisive political show.
If you are a sitting governor and the opposition is able to stomach structure against you, that means you are wicked to the people.
Until the end of our time, I'm the legitimate authority to govern this country.
They gave me 20 minutes to move or they will shoot me.
He has no chance for survival. If he likes himself, this is the best time to get out before he perishes.
The PDP as a ruling party has failed.
So anybody who thinks that government will fold his hands and allow miscreants to take over the streets of our own state and cause havoc is deceiving himself.
The good, bad, ugly, and beautiful sides of the Nigerian political system. Join me every Sunday at 9:15 p.m. on Core TV News.